Hi, welcome to Hanging on His Words. The topic in this video is going to be quite controversial. Nevertheless, I believe that it's important for us as believers, and human beings in general, to know what the Creator has in store for us upon mortal death. Just what does the Bible teach concerning the world of the dead? Stay tuned. When I first started gathering and categorizing all of the texts for the videos in my Underworld series, I quickly got overwhelmed with the vast amount of scriptural references that allude to the world of the dead that's directionally below the land that we currently have our feet planted on. I literally sorted through and mulled over hundreds of scriptures. I decided to tuck a good portion of them away, as there are far too many to cover, and will submit a shorter, more diverse and concise list of references for your consideration. If you're interested in an extensive PDF list, swing on over to my Patreon page, where they'll be uploaded once the series is complete. Like all of my videos, I strive to be thorough and desire to leave you, my brothers and sisters, with a clear and compelling picture of whatever it is that I'm trying to present. The entire premise of this series will be to prove that the scriptures teach, without a shadow of a doubt, the literal existence of an integral location within Yahweh's creation model setting. My hope is that you'll prayerfully examine the content in this series and test it to the scriptures in like manner to the Bereans of Acts 17. Take a look at the words on your screen. The land of the dead has gone by several monikers in the scriptures, and I'll be touching on every one of them in this video. The Underworld is a great abyss. Jubilees 2 verse 2 says, "For on the first day he created the abysses and the darkness, eventide and night, and the light, dawn and day, which he has prepared in the knowledge of his heart." If you recall in my video, Firmaments of Heaven, I discussed the idea of Yahweh creating an abode for the souls of dead men on the very first day of creation. Because the Father knows the end from the beginning, he knew to build this compartment with our foreordained resurrection and the overall judgment of mankind in mind. This abyss is a foundational component within the earth. Romans 10:6-7 says, "But the righteousness that is by faith says, do not say in your heart, who will ascend into heaven? That is to bring Christ down. Or who will descend into the abyss? That is to bring Christ up from the dead." The Apostle Paul often pulled from theological concepts found in the Old Testament in order to drive home a point while writing letters to his first century audience of fellow believers. He understood the differences of directional locality as it pertains to the creation model, a model that our Father above spent 6 days fashioning. Harmonizing our Messiah with his reference out of Deuteronomy chapter 30 verses 12-13 not only displays Paul's technique, but it also proves the vast spatial differences between two key locations, heaven and the abyss. Paul intentionally used the Greek word abusos in verse 7, which is Strong's number 12, a noun that denotes a boundless, bottomless, unfathomable depth. It's the home of both the mortal dead and a vast majority of evil, unclean spirits. I won't get into detail regarding how the abyss applies to the evil spirits in this particular video, but what I do want to highlight is the verbiage Paul uses. Heaven is the name that Yahweh gave to a very unique protective covering commonly known as the firmament. This multi-layered construction is positioned at heights far beyond our ability to grasp at. Opposite to heaven, above, is the abyss below, which dwells at a depth that no one can ever reach, at least while dwelling in a mortal body. In this next passage, Ezra the priest has an intriguing conversation with one of Yahweh's angelic messengers. One of the questions this angel asks Ezra is relevant in that the question he poses is based off of an actual creation model that Ezra was well aware of and fully believed in. It reads, "And he said to me, If I had asked you, how many dwellings are in the heart of the sea, or how many streams are at the source of the deep, or how many streams are above the firmament, or which are the exits of Sheol, or which are the entrances of paradise, perhaps you would have said to me, I never went down into the deep, nor as yet into Sheol, neither did I ever ascend into heaven. Referring to men and their mischievous attempts, Amos records, Though they dig down to Sheol, from there my hand will take them, and though they climb up to heaven, from there I will pull them down. Not only can men not climb up through the firmaments to see the waters above, but men cannot dig down to the depths of Sheol. This would imply that Sheol, despite what some scholars assert, is not just a metaphor for a grave in which a corpse is placed. Obviously, graves can be reached, whereas the abyss of Sheol is unreachable. The Hebrew word for Sheol is Strong's number 7585 and is referred to as the Underworld, a place to which souls descend at death. It's a Hebraic synonym for the Greek words abusos and Hades. We'll get to Hades in a bit. Strong's exhaustive concordance also claims that Sheol can be assigned the titles grave, hell, and pit. The word hell has so much confusion attached to it that it deserves its own separate video, so keep an eye out for it. Sheol is a subterranean retreat, which includes its accessories and inmates. It's a literal subterranean world, or as Psalm 88:12 calls it, a land. Are your wonders known in the darkness, or your righteousness in the land of forgetfulness? This real land down under is an actual, tangible location to which the souls of men descend at the point of their death. Let's look at Genesis 37:35, which is in the context of Jacob receiving the news of his son Joseph's apparent death by a wild beast. All his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted and said, No, I shall go down to Sheol to my son, mourning. Thus his father wept for him. Jacob knew that Joseph would have gone down to Sheol after he died, and was prepared to mourn Joseph to a point that would result in his own death, stating that he would go down to where Joseph was thought to be located. Once again, we see the directional term down being used. The book of Job is full of allusions to Sheol. Job 11:7-9 says, Can you find out the deep things of God? Can you find out the limit of the Almighty? It is higher than the heights of heaven. What can you do? Deeper than Sheol. What can you know? Its measure is longer than the earth and broader than the sea. Once again, we see that Sheol is a place that is deep within the earth. Listen to what the Creator requested of King Ahaz back in the days of the prophet Isaiah. Again, Yahweh spoke to Ahaz, Ask a sign of Yahweh your God. Let it be deep as Sheol, or high as heaven. As deep as Sheol or as high as heaven. There's a definite pattern throughout the scriptures regarding the spatial differences between these two places. Habakkuk 2:5 says, Moreover, wealth is a traitor, an arrogant man who is never at rest. His greed is as wide as Sheol. Like death, he has never enough. He gathers for himself all nations and collects as his own all peoples. Not only is Sheol deep, but as Habakkuk records, it's also quite wide. Just like wealth in this passage, Sheol gathers to herself all nations and collects the souls of all peoples. Isaiah 14:15 says, But you are brought down to Sheol, to the far reaches of the pit. The you in this passage, I believe, is referring to an ancient king, Nimrod of Babylon, the same individual who will be let out of the area of Sheol that he currently occupies when the archangel Joel, the angel that presently restrains him, is commanded to let him loose upon the earth. Nimrod dwelled in the land below, to the far reaches of the pit. The Hebrew word for pit is bower, Strong's number 953, and can mean a pit, cistern, or well. Sheol is likened to a pit. Unlike all other human beings throughout history who have died and descended into Sheol, Nimrod, who seems to be the exception to the rule of Sheol, is situated in a separate compartment that houses spiritual entities that are not of the human kind. though he was born of flesh and blood. I'll be elaborating on this idea in my video, Abaddon, Prison of Demons, Stars, and Rebellious Watchers, so keep an eye out for that in my Underworld playlist. Isaiah's mention of the far reaches of the pit indicates that Sheol as a whole has differences of depth, and the deeper it goes, the more sinister the location. To further prove that Sheol is a physical location that exists at depths well below the levels of soil that we humans dig around in, let's take a close look at the event that Korah and his household experienced back in Numbers 16. But if Yahweh creates something new, and the ground opens its mouth and swallows them up with all that belongs to them, and they go down alive into Sheol, then you shall know that these men have despised Yahweh. And as soon as he had finished speaking all these words, the ground under them split apart, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up, with their households and all the people who belonged to Korah and all their goods. So they and all that belonged to them went down alive into Sheol, and the earth closed over them, and they perished from the midst of the assembly. As you likely took away from these passages, this was no ordinary event. In fact, that was the whole point. The earth opening wide and deep enough so as to allow for Korah, his relatives, and all their possessions to descend into Sheol while they were still alive was something that was never done before. Not to mention that once they fell into the depths of the earth closed over them. Yahweh chose Moses as Israel's leader, and Korah's attempts at forming a coup were met with an earth-shattering response. This was a literal act of judgment upon Korah, and his one-way ticket to Sheol happened exactly as it reads. Speaking of judgment, Jubilees 5:14 says, "And there is nothing in heaven or on earth, or in light or in darkness, or in Sheol or in the depth, or in the place of darkness, which is not judged. And all their judgments are ordained and written and engraved." Whether you're a spiritual entity at the very top, an unclean spirit or rebellious angel at the very bottom, or everything in between, all sentient beings are going to be judged. This declaration screams a contrast of locality. Continuing on with judgment as it pertains to Sheol, let's peer into a highly criticized, and to me, trustworthy text that will offer us even more insight. Enoch, the pre-flood prophet and scribe, provides us with descriptions of Sheol that are among the most vivid I've ever studied. 1 Enoch 22:1-4 says, "And from there I went to another place, and he showed me in the west another great and high mountain of hard rock, and there were hollow places in it, deep and wide and very smooth. How smooth are the hollow places, and deep and dark to look at. Then Raphael, one of the holy angels who were with me, answered and said, These hollow places have been created for this very purpose, where the spirits, the souls of the dead, will be collected. For them were they formed, and here will be collected all the souls of the sons of men. These places in which they dwell shall they occupy until the day of judgment, and until their appointed period. Their appointed period will be long, even until the great judgment." Amidst this handful of descriptive texts, we are provided with Sheol's purpose in terms of its origins, as well as its overall eschatological function. Plainly stated, Sheol was created with the objective of collecting the souls of dead men and storing them within its cavernous walls until their appointed periods of release. Then Jonah prayed to Yahweh his God from the belly of the fish, saying, I called out to Yahweh out of my distress, and he answered me. Out of the womb of Sheol I cried, and you heard my voice. For you cast me into the deep, into the heart of the seas, and the flood surrounded me. All your waves and your billows passed over me. Then I said, I am driven away from your sight, yet I shall again look upon your holy temple. The waters closed in over me to take my life. The deep surrounded me. Weeds were wrapped about my head, at the roots of the mountains. I went down to the land whose bars closed upon me forever. Yet you brought up my life from the pit, O Yahweh my God. Many people don't realize this, but Jonah actually drowned to death when he was thrown overboard while fleeing from Yahweh via a ship headed to Tarshish. For more information about that, feel free to click the linked video above. Jonah had a first-hand experience of being in Sheol, which he referred to as a womb. He was kept in the womb of Sheol for 3 days, until Yahweh allowed his soul to be placed back into his body of flesh, which is being kept safe in the belly of the fish. Jonah can call Sheol a womb because water encapsulates it, just as he described to us in great detail. Now see what Yahweh tells Ezra regarding the womb of Sheol. In Sheol, the chambers for the souls are like the womb. For just as a woman who is in travail makes haste to escape the pangs of birth, so also do these places hasten to give back those things that were committed to them from the beginning. Just like a woman whose womb desires to give birth, Sheol will give birth to the souls that are kept in her chambers. The souls that were committed to her from Abel until the last person to die and descend into her at the end of the millennial reign. Isaiah uses the same eschatological birthing verbiage in the following verse. Your dead will live, their bodies will rise. You who dwell in the dust, awake and sing for joy, for your dew is a dew of light, and the earth will give birth to the dead. All the wealth and riches in the world cannot prevent a man from descending into the womb of Sheol. Enoch understood this. He states, Now they shall say unto themselves, Our souls are full of unrighteous gain, but it does not prevent us from descending from the midst thereof into the womb of Sheol. The next 3 passages, which were authored by David, convey the idea of water and Sheol being intertwined in similar locations. Psalm 69:14-15 says, Deliver me from sinking in the mire. Let me be delivered from my enemies and from the deep waters. Let not the flood sweep over me, or the deep swallow me up, or the pit close its mouth over me. Psalm 18:4-5 says, The waves of death encompassed me. The torrents of destruction assailed me. The cords of Sheol entangled me. The snares of death confronted me. And Psalm 88:7 says, Your wrath lies heavy upon me, and you overwhelm me with all your waves. Referring to the evil unclean spirits of the dead Nephilim, Job makes mention of the location of those who are in the underworld as being under the waters. Job 26:5-6 says, Shall giants be born from under the waters, and the inhabitants thereof? Hades is naked before him, and destruction has no covering. The Greek word HADES is Strong's number 86, and is defined as the abode of departed spirits and the unseen world. It's the Greek equivalent to the Hebrew word Sheol. The next section of this video will look at the underworld's preservative function as it pertains to the souls that it keeps within. In the book of 2nd Baruch, Yahweh informs Baruch that his soul will be kept safe within Sheol until the day of the Lord, the day when our Messiah, his holy angels, and the New Jerusalem descend to the earth. 2nd Baruch 25:2 says, And he answered and said unto me, You too shall be preserved until that time, until that sign which the Most High will work for the inhabitants of the earth in the end of days. The sign that Yahweh will work in the end of days is in relation to the calamity that the earth will undergo through the events of the day of the Lord, which will be followed by the ushering in of the age of our Messiah and his millennial reign over the earth. Yahweh goes on to tell Baruch, And it shall come to pass after these things, when the time of the advent of the Messiah is fulfilled, that he shall return in glory. Then all who have fallen asleep in hope of him shall rise again. And it shall come to pass at that time that the treasuries will be opened, in which is preserved the number of the souls of the righteous, and they shall come forth, and a multitude of souls shall be seen together in one assemblage of one thought. And the first shall rejoice, and the last shall not be grieved. For they know that the time is come of which it is said, that it is the consummation of the times. But the souls of the wicked, when they behold all these things, shall then waste away the more. For they shall know that their torment has come, and their perdition has arrived. A treasury is a store or collection of valuable and delightful things. The righteous souls that are collected and preserved in this treasury will be released from the womb of Sheol and will rise again into everlasting life, being able to dwell in the land of the living once again. Further on in the book of 2nd Baruch, Baruch proclaims, "You care for the number which pass away, that they may be preserved, and you prepare an abode for those that are to be." The Father cares so much for us that he prepared Sheol for the very purpose of preserving who we truly are until the consummation of the times. The abode that Baruch mentions in the latter half of the verse is in reference to the New Jerusalem, a kingdom that will be inhabited by those of us who are scheduled to be born again via the birthing process out of the womb of Sheol at the resurrection of the dead. When this event manifests, we will then be placed within the walls of our eternal inheritance. 2 Baruch 50 verses 1-2 says, "And he answered and said unto me, Hear, Baruch, this word, and write in the remembrance of your heart all that you shall learn. For the earth shall then assuredly restore the dead, which it now receives, in order to preserve them. It shall make no change in their form, but as it has received, so shall it restore them, and as I delivered them unto it, so also shall it raise them." There's no ambiguity here. Yahweh communicated a concept to Baruch that can be understood no other way. There's a compartment within the earth that preserves the souls of men until the day of restoration and renewal. Job chapter 14 verses 10-14 says, "But a man dies and is laid low. Man breathes his last, and where is he? As waters fail from a lake and a river wastes away and dries up, so a man lies down and rises not again, till the heavens are no more. He will not awake or be roused out of his sleep. Oh, that you would hide me in Sheol, that you would conceal me until your wrath be past, that you would appoint me a set time, and remember me. If a man dies, shall he live again? All the days of my service I would wait, till my renewal should come." Job fully understood that all men go to Sheol, and that those who are righteous will not be roused from Sheol's womb until the heavens are no more. This phrase lines up with literal events that are also recorded in Isaiah chapter 34 verse 4 and Revelation 6 verse 14. The firmaments are going to be rolled back so that the King of Kings can descend to the earth along with his warrior angels. Job, along with all of the righteous, will be concealed and hidden within Sheol until the wrath of God is past, which will then transition to the releasing of their souls. Ezra concurs with the theology that's taught in 2nd Baruch. For Ezra 7:32 says, "And the earth shall give up those who are asleep in it, and the dust those who dwell silently in it, and the chambers shall give up the souls which have been committed to them." As we can see, the chambers of Sheol preserve the souls which have been committed to them. Furthermore, once the soul of a human being has entered Sheol, it gets guarded by Yahweh's angelic guardian watchers. Most Christians are familiar with the following verse out of Luke 16. "The poor man died and was carried by the angels to Abraham's bosom." Simply put, Abraham's bosom was a common Hebraic figure of speech that pointed to a literal compartment where Abraham and every other patriarch resided within Sheol. Abraham was and is a prominent figure of the faith, which is why the phrase came into existence in the first place. A familiar expression was recorded in the book of 4 Maccabees, hundreds of years before Yeshua used it in Luke 16. In this book, several covenant faithful Jews that lived during the Maccabean era believed that if they stood up to the tyrants that oppressed them unto death by refusing to break the commandments of God, they would be embraced by the fathers of the faith once they descended into Sheol. 4 Maccabees 13 verse 17 says, "For if we so die, Abraham and Isaac and Jacob will welcome us, and all the fathers will praise us." Let's hone in on the idea of angels acting as guardians. Did Jesus teach something new about angels carrying men to Abraham's bosom? Or were there earlier texts that mention angelic interactions with men upon death? 2 Baruch chapter 23 verses 4-5 says, "Because when Adam sinned, and death was decreed against those who should be born, then the multitude of those who should be born was numbered. And for that number a place was prepared where the living might dwell, and the dead might be guarded. Before therefore the number aforesaid is fulfilled, the creature will not live again, for my spirit is the creator of life, and Sheol, will receive the dead. So, the dead are guarded in Sheol. But how do we know that there are angels guarding men? Ezra was informed that the guardians mentioned in 2nd Baruch are indeed of the celestial kind. The compartment where the unrighteous souls of men are gathered into are not guarded by angels. However, the habitations of the others, the righteous souls, are guarded by angels in profound quiet. Also, they, the righteous souls, understand the rest that they now enjoy, being gathered into their chambers and guarded by angels in profound quiet, and the glory waiting for them in the last days. Just like men who stand guard at a prison, a select number of angels are put on guard in Sheol. Speaking of prisons, let's peer into the concept of Sheol being likened to a prison. Remember the word inmates that the Strong's Exhaustive Concordance used with regards to Sheol? The Underworld keeps its inhabitants locked within its compartments. As I stated earlier, Jonah went down to this prison and stayed there until the Father allowed him to be released. Jonah 2 verse 6 says, "I went down to the land whose bars closed upon me forever. Yet you brought up my life from the pit, O Yahweh my God." The mention of the bars that closed upon Jonah is an allusion to the mechanism that allows the souls of men entry and exit from the land of the dead. Job also refers to the bars of Sheol in a rhetorical question that was aimed at his kingly companions. Job 17:13-16 says, "If I hope for Sheol as my house, if I make my bed in darkness, if I say to the pit, 'You are my father,' and to the worm, 'My mother,' or my sister, where then is my hope? Who will see my hope? Will it go down to the bars of Sheol? Shall we descend together into the dust?" The ancients fully understood that, upon mortal death, they would dwell in a land that has bars and gates to keep their souls incarcerated. Take a look at what Isaiah and Solomon record. A writing of Hezekiah, king of Judah, after he had been sick and had recovered from his sickness. "I said, in the quiet of my days, I must depart. I am consigned to the gates of Sheol for the rest of my years." Wisdom of Solomon 16:13-14 says, "For you have power over life and death. You do lead men down to the gates of Sheol and back again. A man in his wickedness kills another, but he cannot bring back the departed spirit, nor set free the imprisoned soul." In Matthew 16, Jesus and his disciples take a stroll into Caesarea Philippi and come across a well-known cave that the peoples of that area believed was the actual gateway that led to Hades below. Jesus says, "And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my assembly, and the gates of Hades shall not prevail against it." I'll be further expounding on this Matthew 16:18 passage in a separate video, but for now I want to point your attention to the Messiah's mention of the gates of Hades. Yeshua cannot teach something that is false or inaccurate, and I believe that he taught that the gates of Hades was a real thing, just not what the people in Caesarea Philippi believed. The gates of Hades are located in the underworld, and our Savior holds the keys to these gates. Revelation 1:17-18 says, "When I saw him, I being John, I fell at his feet as though dead, and he laid his right hand on me, saying, 'Fear not, I am the first and the last, and the living one. I died, and behold, I am alive forevermore, and I have the keys of death and Hades.'" Before Christ was given the keys to the gates of Hades, he, like all men made of flesh and blood, had to go to that same prison upon mortal death. After crucifixion led to his death, he released his spirit to the Father, and his soul descended into Hades, where he proclaimed who he was to the spirits of the souls of men who had died during the flood of Noah. Peter gives us a little snapshot of this event in his first epistle. "For Christ also died for sins once for all, the just for the unjust, so that he might bring us to God, having been put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the spirit, in which also he went and made proclamation to the spirits in prison, who once were disobedient, when the patience of God kept waiting in the days of Noah, during the construction of the ark, in which a few, that is, 8 persons, were brought safely through water." Sheol acts like a prison. What man can live and never see death? Who can deliver his soul from the power of Sheol? Thankfully for us, we know that Yeshua's story did not end with his soul remaining imprisoned in Sheol. As David prophesied, "For you will not abandon my soul to Sheol, or let your Holy One see corruption." The Apostle Peter recognized that Psalm 16 verse 10 directly applied to Yeshua, which he revealed to his audience in the book of Acts. God raised him up, loosing the pangs of death, because it was not possible for him to be held by it. For David says concerning him, "I saw the Lord always before me, for he is at my right hand, that I may not be shaken. Therefore my heart was glad, and my tongue rejoiced. My flesh also will dwell in hope. For you will not abandon my soul to Hades, or let your Holy One see corruption. You have made known to me the paths of life. You will make me full of gladness with your presence." Brothers, I may say to you with confidence about the patriarch David that he both died and was buried, and his tomb is with us to this day. Being therefore a prophet, and knowing that God had sworn with an oath to him that he would set one of his descendants on his throne, he foresaw and spoke about the resurrection of the Christ, that he was not abandoned to Hades, nor did his flesh see corruption. This Jesus God raised up, and of that we are all witnesses. Our Savior lives, and because he was delivered from the power of Sheol, we too can be redeemed from its legal authority over our souls. This is a huge component of the gospel message of the kingdom of God. We actually get to live in the New Jerusalem because Yeshua will raise our souls from out of Sheol at his return. Hallelujah. Now, just how long did Jesus remain occupied in Sheol before God raised him up out of it? Matthew 12:40 says, "For just as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth." The soul of our Messiah dwelt in Sheol, or as he calls it in this passage, the heart of the earth, for 3 days and 3 nights. The following 2 verses are what's promised to those of us who will be dead in Messiah and waiting for our own born-again resurrection event while resting in Sheol. Hosea 13:14 says, "I shall ransom them from the power of Sheol. I shall redeem them from death. O death, where are your plagues? O Sheol, where is your sting? Compassion is hidden from my eyes." Proverbs 15:24 says, "The path of life goes upward for the wise, that he may depart from the netherworld beneath." When the Messiah returns to the earth with the kingdom of God, he will wage war against the nations that have gathered themselves against him. Though the righteous souls of the elect will be released from Sheol on that great and terrible day, many souls of wicked men will go down into her when Yeshua annihilates them from off of the earth. 1 Enoch 56 verse 8 says, "In those days Sheol shall open its jaws, and they shall be swallowed up therein, and their destruction shall be at an end. Sheol shall devour the sinners in the presence of the elect." Testament of Levi, chapter 4, verse 1 says, "Now, therefore, know that the Lord shall execute judgment upon the sons of men, because when the rocks are being rent, and the sun quenched, and the waters dried up, and the fire cowering, and all creation troubled, and the invisible spirits melting away, and Hades takes spoils through the visitations of the Most High, men will be unbelieving and persist in their iniquity. On this account, with punishment shall they be judged." Hades will continue to take the souls of men as her spoils when the Most High sends his Son to perform justice on the earth. Once our coming Messiah wreaks the type of havoc that he has planned for the inhabitants of the earth, he will rule and reign for a period of 1,000 years. After this millennial reign is completed, Hades is commanded to release all of her captives, which will include the souls of righteous mortal men who will die during the millennial reign, as well as all the unrighteous wicked souls of men who will finally be judged and cast into the lake of fire. Once this judgment takes place, Hades, as a compartment that houses the souls of dead men, will no longer be needed and will also be cast into the lake of fire. At that juncture, the death of mortal men will be an ancient concept in a bygone era of a mankind's past. Revelation 20:13-15 says, "And the sea gave up the dead who were in it. Death and Hades gave up the dead who were in them. And they were judged, each one of them, according to what they had done. Then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. This is the second death, the lake of fire. And if anyone's name was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire." I hope this presentation was enlightening, and that you were encouraged by what the Creator has planned for you through His Son. As always, please like and share this video, and if you haven't already subscribed, please take a second to do that. I want to thank all of you who support the efforts of Hanging on His Words. I'm truly blessed to have a family of brothers and sisters who yearn for what the Father has in store for them. Shalom.